I'm Renee Barnett, and this is What's Left.
When I said, hey, hey, what's wrong with you? I want to take you back tonight just to see you smile. You know I'm gonna be there
1, 2, 3, 4. Hello, and welcome to All People of Goodwill. Joined by my co-host today, Sean Halsall. Whoops, that's George White and Sean Halsall. Hi, guys.
Hi, Renee.
What's the story from your side? There's a lot going on over here.
All quiet at the moment, but we're just heading into our party conference season, so no doubt there'll be chaos afoot.
Yeah. It's been kind of crazy here. Of course, we're sitting here with a looming government shutdown of the entire federal government, which means that a lot of people will not be able to collect their paychecks. A lot of federal employees and workers, and of course, Congress voted to pay themselves during the shutdown and their staffs, who they've declared as essential workers. But forget about, the rest of us out here.
Funny, they accuse trade unions of holding companies to ransom when we withdraw our labour on strike, but literally keeping workers pay from them because you're not getting your own way, and democracy's not quite working out for you this week. There's completely to put them people on the breadline.
It's always seemed an unusual phenomenon. I don't know that other countries, certainly in the UK, it doesn't work that way. I think I'm being right in saying that it's the debt ceiling, is it? That the amount of debt that the government holds is capped at a level, and they have to go through this debate periodically to go above that to set a new level.
Yeah, and speaking of the auto workers, I guess it was a pretty big deal, according to some people and according to the news, that for the first time an American president has stood on a picket line. I think that caused a lot of rancor, of course, from the other side, from the Republican Party, from the right. But I think it was, largely symbolic, because I think he was only there for a short period of time. He wanted to make his presence known and his support for the strike. So I was quite happy that he did that, just, for the optics, just letting people know where he stands on that.
It's hilarious again, the duplicity of that. I saw some articles where it's saying, the president's meant to be seen as a mediator. How many presidents have we seen stood shoulder to shoulder with sort of corporate giants and these big business people of America? I mean, Donald Trump was the president and he claims to be a businessman. How true that is or not, we can debate. But
I think we found out now through the New York State Court.
I mean, there's absolutely no controversy.
It's all smoke and mirrors.
There's absolutely zero controversy when the presidents of the United States of America have stood shoulder to shoulder with captains of industry. But the minute they go and sit with workers or speak to workers, then it's all over the press. It just baffles me a little bit.
It really does. I mean, there's a lot of baffling things going on here. The rising support for Vladimir Putin from the right in America is quite puzzling and scary, because they do not know what they're talking about. They don't know what life in Russia is like. They think everything is just wonderful and hunky-dory, and he's a strong man and we need a strong man leader. Well, strong men leaders are the ones that have gotten us in trouble throughout history. And I just don't see how they cannot see the parallels between what happened in Germany prior to the big wars and what in what's happening here in the United States, and I guess around the world to an extent. I don't know if I'm just more aware of it here, or if it really is more prevalent here. But I re-listened to our show, which I would recommend to our listeners if you haven't heard the show with Dr. Bandy Lee. I think that was our second show that we did. I believe she was our first guest.
I think second. I think we had Bera from Italy on the first show.
Oh, first. Oh, did we? Okay.
Yeah.
Very early on, we had Dr. Bandy Lee, and of course, she was leading the charge of mental health professionals who were calling attention to this idea of, contagion of this Trump derangement that's going through. I listened very carefully about what needs to be done, because it is a mental health issue. Because these guys that have these huge egos, these narcissists, I mean, they've got mental health issues, and they're passing them on to other people.
Renee, can I just jump in? Do you think it is a strong man, people wanting a strong man problem, or do you think it's more democracies being eroded, and our democracies are much, much weaker because of the influence capital has on that, and big businesses throwing money at things and eroding democracy in that way? It's clear now in much of Western politics that very few politicians speak for people. Most are bought and paid for.
Well, I think it's both. And I do think that the whole idea, well, I think it's both. I think it could be actually both. It's puzzling. But I think the idea that they want a strong man, they don't really. They think they do. They think that's part of what's needed.
I think people recognise democracy's gone, or being eroded and nearly gone, and they're looking for a George Washington sort of figure to come and replace that again and fix everything for them. And that isn't the answer. I think these people only gain power when the democracy is being eroded or gone or going. And these people see there's an opportunity there and use the media and all that. What are your thoughts on it, George?
Well, the traditional, in my view anyway, the traditional place where the democracy comes out of, the movements that it comes out of, are the exact same ones that they're trying to tear down, aren't they? They're trying to tear down trade unions. I think we've heard the comments that have been made about the UAW president, and that is a democratically elected president of a union that's doing exactly what they're supposed to do, and advocating for their members for better terms and conditions. I think you mentioned about the media as well, and I think it won't have gone without comment that Rupert Murdoch's just stepped down, one of the more prevalent sort of media barons. But the disproportionate effect that very small amounts of very wealthy people have over the public discourse. I think if Rupert Murdoch decides to run a story, it has global reach, and that ought not to be the case. That one person can decide what several hundreds of millions of people perhaps read.
Consume, exactly. Yeah, I feel like that. It's just my opinion, which isn't worth a lot, but I feel like he chose, even though he's 92 years old, he could have stood down, 20 years ago if he wanted to. But I think that someone like him, who is, sort of a megalomaniac type guy, I think the reason he's stepping down is because of all these lawsuits. And I think that he's thinking that by him stepping down, that he will take some of the pressure off Fox, they'll say we're going in a different direction, or we're making changes, But his son Lachlan is in charge. They booted the other son James out a long time ago because he tried to temper some of the things that they were saying, or at least point them out that they were just not true and that sort of thing. And so they just got rid of him, and Lachlan became the heir apparent of the network. And I hear that Lachlan is just as extreme, if not more so, than Rupert Murdoch.
It's interesting because Murdoch's sort of the closest thing we've got to a real life Bond villain. He really is. It's not really any other characters that properly fit that level of fictitious, like Spectre level, controlling all these different governments and people with his puppeteers. And it's very interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens next, whether it does tone down and sort of retest the water, or whether it is ramped up, and whether that's emulated across the world, whether it's the same in Australia, Britain, and America, because we've always found Sky Sports over here, which would be owned by News International, News Corp, whatever they're called.
News Corp, yeah.
Isn't as sort of extreme as Fox News. And there's had to be other sort of things set up here to fill that space. So it's interesting. I know they are quite extreme, probably more so than America in Australia, where it is sort of more hard right conspiracy.
I've noticed a lot of hard right stuff coming out of Australia. I'm sorry to say, but I picked up on that in some of their elections and things like that, and then just what I hear, some of the far right activity. I guess it's just everywhere. I guess it's this is the new pandemic, and it's a mental health pandemic. So it's really crazy, but it's one thing after the other. It's like we never get a break here in America without some big scandal, some big cliffhanger, some threat, each day hanging over our heads. Today it's government shutdown. I'm going to apologize. I have my dogs in the room. I'm without a dog sitter today, and if I put them out, they'll just bark and scratch at the door. Anyway, I'm so sorry. But yeah, it's really wearing on the American people. And it's causing other mental health problems. For those of us, crazy dogs, for those of us who don't buy in, to the crazy right-wing conspiracy theories, we're having to deal with all those that do. And it's so frustrating and confusing to try to figure out how it is they can believe some of these things that they purport to believe. It's just outrageous. And I think so. The rest of us, I think, are depressed, stressed and depressed.
I think it stems from as well. I mean, we've got a similar problem here where we did have a strong trade union movement, and a lot of people got their political education through those movements and were much more politically attuned to how the economy worked. And if you understand all them things, it's much, much harder to sort of pull your wool over your eyes and blame the other person and blame that minority, this minority. And with the sort of erosion of trade unions and attacks on trade unions consistently for decades, we've just not got as many people with that access to trade union political education and people just understanding how they fit into the economy. And I think that's a big thing. And also we're seeing trade union membership rise in America, which is very interesting to see. And that sort of return to organised labour. And hopefully that signals the global return.
I talk to you guys a lot and James Martin. So I know a bit, not a lot, but a bit about trade union movement in the UK and what goes on there. And it seems like to me that you guys have been a bit ahead of us in your backing of labor unions, but it just could be because all the people I'm talking to are union people. So how do you compare? the two?
I think, to be honest, it's around 23% membership density in this country. Is that right, George? Around about. So just under 1 in 5, well, 1 in 4 people's in a union. But they tend to be heavily sort of focused in traditional unionized labour, although a massive public sector sort of presence of the trade union movement. And just a quick shout out as well, the RMT and ASLEV are on strike at the moment this weekend. So solidarity to all our comrades there. They've, funnily enough, picked the Conservative conference weekend to pull their trains off, so making it more difficult for the Tories to get around. But yeah, just express our solidarity. I think it would be remiss if we missed that. But yeah,
what there does seem to
the right.
Sorry. What there does seem to be though with the sort of the latest round of strikes in the UK, like Sean just pointed out with the rail strikes, there does seem to be there's been certainly at the beginning there was a concerted media effort to try to smear the unions and smear individual union leaders, and it seems to have basically massively backfired. I think there does seem to be sort of a new generation of more social media savvy people who can see through an obvious stitch up, and it's completely backfired on them because they've turned people who, if they hadn't have tried to give them a good doing over, wouldn't have appeared to be quite such personalities as well.
I think you can get away with it in the past when one group of people on strike or another because they're struggling. I think with the cost of living crisis going on globally and the squeeze on pay, it's difficult to not have sympathy for a striking worker for wanting more money when you yourself are seeing the cost rises, and that even if you're what would be traditional middle class, for lack of a better term, for this point, people from most stratas of the economy are feeling the pinch, and I think people are realising, yeah, good on them for fighting for a better wage. I wish I could do the same now, and maybe I'd urge everyone to look into joining the union. There is no one who works for a living that should not be in a trade union, no matter what your profession. But I think people are feeling it themselves and understand now, where in the past that wasn't always so. I mean, I spent 9 weeks on strike in 2017. And then my same branch after I left were out again in 2020, and they were very different experiences. So we did come very little sympathy in 2017, called greedy, all that. And I think even then 3-4 years later, the mood had shifted because I think the nurses had started going on strike. 21 it was. The nurses had been out on strike, and people were thinking differently about trade unions by that point. And the RMT had been out for a bit. I also don't think we can write off the effects people like Mick Lynch have had, like very, very good media savvy operators.
I was just getting ready to ask you about that because I think you're right about that.
I think he just doesn't show the deference to the media that a lot of people have kind of felt they've had to in the past, where you've got to sort of kowtow and be polite and pleasant. He just talks straight to them. You've got
very blunt.
People like Richard Madeley just making complete idiots of themselves who don't understand our movement and don't understand the struggles people go through.
Yeah.
Trying to belittle someone who is clearly one of us. He's clearly a working class bloke, clearly done a job, clearly gone through struggle. And I think they just look like the enemy. When they're at that point, when Richard Madeley's banging on the desk and laughing and making daft comments, he very clearly, it's clear to see who he represents, who his interest is represented by.
Yeah. And I'm taking a lot of hope out of the leadership, some of the leadership here in the United States. I'm very impressed with Sean Fain. He reminds me a little bit of that Mick Lynch style. He's very straightforward, and he doesn't care, who he offends if he's offended by that person. He doesn't mince words, and I really, really like that. He's been he's gaining a lot in popularity because he's been in the news a lot. And I've heard several people commenting, on, he should run for president. He gave a scathing takedown of Donald Trump on some news program the other day, and at the end of that, the news guy said, "Sean Fain for president." And I thought, yeah, he would be good. It would be interesting to have someone that was actually a representative of the people, not big business, because the government is supposed to be of and by and for the people.
Speaking a little bit from a biased point of view, keep him where he is. It's trade unions need those leaders much more than that bonkers institution needs. We can't keep losing our leaders to end up being captured by capital eventually and dragged through the ringer in the White House over there. It's
we're desperate though. We need someone. We need help.
If you look at what's driving the need for this to come through, it's no longer there's been a pay offer and it's there or thereabouts. It's slightly sub-inflationary, but we can live with it. We're looking at levels of inflation where a fifth or a quarter of people's living standards have been eroded in probably in the space of about 3 years, and that's just not sustainable. People can't. No amount of belt tightening tightens over that sort of fall in living standards. So I think people have been able to sort of economise and work around sub-inflationary pay rises before. It's do or die now. It's the breaking point, and people have had to wake up to that fact quite rapidly, haven't they?
Yeah,
both sides of the Atlantic.
You've only got to look at the rise of sort of side hustles and stuff where people now, it's completely normal to have 2, 3, 4 income streams if you're a young person to keep a roof over your head. You look back to our grandparents' generation, you'd need one person going to work to sustain a family, and these aren't small families. These are, I mean, my grandmother was one of 14, so it's mad. We've just been completely had the wool pulled over our eyes and fed this lie that we should be getting our value through going and earning as much money as possible and sort of consuming as much shit as possible. I think that's sort of falling away now. And like I said, hopefully trade unions are rising again like a phoenix, and they will start politically educating people and leading the way to a better world.
And the other side of the equation is that these aren't companies that are, losing money. They're not. That I think within the auto workers in the United States, this is sort of record profits territory. But also in a lot of the companies, the energy companies, the food retailers are all reporting bumper profits. It isn't like they can't. There isn't that it's unaffordable. It isn't like it can't be paid for.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it makes absolutely no sense the way that things are. The auto industry gets bailed out by the government and then comes back with a vengeance, makes record profits, and gives all the management and executives big whopping salary increases. But how did they get there? They got there because the people were making the cars. It makes no sense, but we're trained to look at it that way, that, you should be making, $500 a week when this guy's making, $15,000 or $50,000 a week, whatever it is. Some of these salaries for management are outrageous, just outrageous. And I'm getting, the older I get, the less, I appreciate and trust wealthy people. Because
well, I think if it's anything similar to the UK as well, and I've no doubt that it is, but the sort of the ratio between what a CEO would have been paid compared to the lowest paid worker in the company, and so going back to say the 70s, that was something reasonable fathomable. And now it's several thousands of times what the lowest paid workers are being paid.
Yeah.
So it isn't like throughout all that period of, you know, the belt tightening years that everybody's been tightening their belts in. What we've tightened our belts over has just gone further up the chain, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've just pulled up an article here where, yeah, the average CEO pay since 1978 has risen by 1,460%.
That's ridiculous.
It's crazy. I mean, I just listen then. It's almost like when we bail these things out, we should be nationalising them or making them work around, like we were talking about with Matthew Brown a few weeks ago, worker co-ops and stuff like that. These are things that are possible, and I would trust people working in a place to know how to run that business much quicker than I trust these CEOs who spend more time on the golf course than they do managing businesses.
It's funny how they'll hire somebody to run the entire place that's from an entirely different business area, but because he's a CEO, it's like, you know, but I don't know how that works, but it'll be really strange. And then the people that know what's going on are the people that are down below them and making a pittance.
It's funny, we trust normal people with democracy for picking our governments, but we can't trust them with deciding what happens in a workplace. It's almost like we could expand that a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
which workplaces is it that are involved in the UAW strike? Is it Ford?
Workers.
Is it Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis?
Yeah.
So there's so obviously Ford, Chevrolet, and
well, General Motors is Chevrolet, but I think those are the three. It seems like there was another one, but definitely Stellantis and GMC. I know.
And Stellantis is including what's Citroen and.
It's Jeep.
Right.
Yeah. In America, I've just pulled this up as well. Stellantis is Chrysler, Jeep, and the Ram.
Oh, Stellantis is Chrysler too. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely massive global company that has I mean, we've got Vauxhalls and Citroen, and I can't remember off the top.
Oh, those are Stellantis also.
Yeah, huge company. I've worked with quite a few trade union reps from Vauxhall mainly, but yeah.
Yeah, when the strike began and all the talk began, it's funny because I didn't know who Stellantis was. I'm thinking, oh, we know Ford, GMC, and you know all the others, but I thought, who's Stellantis?
Yeah, they don't tend to trade under their actual name. You won't very rarely see their name or anything. It's the models
it's
they own.
true. They don't use that in their branding, but yeah, I can see they have quite a fleet of different cars. But yeah, in poor Russia, I don't know what they're going to do about cars. The price of cars has gone up like incredibly, and Russia doesn't make any cars. So they're saying that they're making cars, but what they're doing is getting all the stuff from China, and just finishing the assembly in Russia. But the price no average person could afford a car there now. It's just prices are going crazy. And I don't see how they can sustain, because the only real product they have is their energy, oil and gas. And that's gone down so much. They really screwed the pooch, if I can say that, when they started playing games with Europe and the gas lines and all that stuff, because they just found a different way. They just found a different way to get their supplies. And hopefully we're all boosting our alternative energy sources as well.
I was reading something a couple of weeks ago about Saudi, was it, dumping the price of oil, stopping producing oil to try and make Biden look bad.
bad. Yeah.
I mean, that's just the same we were just talking then with Russia. It's insane that politicians and sort of the geopolitics have come to this level where they're messing around with ordinary people's ability to travel and heat themselves and feed themselves to make political points and try and influence politics. There has to be an endpoint to this. It's worrying to see ordinary people be played as political pawns for a game that surely should be about looking after us and us as humans. It's madness.
Yeah, it is. It's disheartening, and
Well,
they're
it's
playing
another.
us, but I mean, but some of us are aware that we're being played, but we're still being played because that's the system that we're in. And you got to somewhat play along while you're trying to think of ways to change it, because we all have to live. It's just, and it's getting so expensive here, especially in places like Los Angeles where I am. I don't know how a young family here could make it or buy a house or even rent a house.
And that plays into the division, doesn't it? Because people haven't got time to think about these things. Like here, we're very fortunate to have the space, but people haven't got the time to think about what is the root cause of the problems, and that's when people turn to populism and sort of these really outrageous sort of solutions to the problems, which aren't solutions. It's offering up all power to people who just haven't got our best interests at heart.
Yeah. I continue to think more and more during all this about the French Revolution and about how it was that, and a lot of it was over food, just sustenance, and how it was that the people figured out that either they figured out or they just had it up to here and said, we don't even care what happens. We're revolting. But when they realized that the power in numbers that they had, that's when things changed.
And I mean, myself and Jay were on your show years ago now, and it feels like talking about both the French and the American Revolution and the similarities and same place. Yes. And again, I think it's always what is, food's a massive sort of driver. But there tends to always be a flashpoint. Something happens, something mad. A soldier's on the streets and his rifle goes off, someone gets killed, and then you're off to the races. But and again, the difference is in France, you had sort of like Enlightenment thinkers and stuff who've been discussing these ideas and these solutions, which we just don't seem to have. The philosophers are all gone. And we seem to have handed it over to sort of pseudo idiots like Jordan Peterson and the other sort of clowns like that, who are the ones leading that debate on politics now. And them arguments aren't really being made from the left. And I feel that's because we've been under the cosh for so long and being battered and kicked. Defending all the time rather than being able to express our ideas on a fair and equal playing field.
It's true. It's true. I think, we talk about, how people are programmed from birth, by society, by their families, by different influences, and you get these certain things ingrained so much in you that you don't even realize it. And so it actually, you're programmed to accept things that are against your own interest, for some higher cause or reason or something, some excuse that they make. And it's difficult because even the most, I'm not going to say woke, but even the most aware person, I would suggest, has some vestiges of programming. I consider myself, very liberal and, very left wing, but I've caught myself at certain times thinking a certain thing and realizing that that wasn't even really my own thought. That was something that had been embedded in me, and maybe I should, look at it from a different perspective. But I think that it's like if you want to talk about a conspiracy, it's just the conspiracy of the system against the people, and getting the people to agree to, again, accept things against their own interests at their own peril.
No, absolutely. And we are all products of our environment. We all have the views we have because of our experiences through life. Absolutely. I'm thankful every day that I went into an industry with a strong trade union. And that's where I got my political education, through the trade union movement. And I am biased, but yeah. Also, let's go back to that voting against your own interests. I don't think that's always necessarily a super negative thing. I think voting against your own individual interest for a greater good and the collective can be a good thing. And I think often voting for higher taxes might not be in my personal interest, but if that helps people who need it, then good.
But that's against the, whole idea that, that's been drilled into our heads. We're talking about the kids' lunches, or, the Republicans say, the Democrats, or the left-hand side, says it's it's a hunger issue. It's, it's a social issue. The Republicans say, no, it's an issue of responsibility. So it's like these things are ingrained in us. If we don't act like X, there's something wrong with you. And yeah, if you may not like this, but that's just the way it is. And it's always been that way. So it's like, it really discourages critical thinking and independent thought and ideas. And that's a problem.
We're having it at the moment. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister's floating the idea of getting rid of the inheritance tax. And amongst certain demographics, it's going down massively popularly. But it only actually affects about 40,000 people, 40,000 of the richest people in the country. So by no means is it in people's actual interests to find that a popular policy. They can only lose out if those taxes are missing from the tax take. So it's this. Somehow they've managed to convince people that they're, I don't know, somehow temporarily embarrassed millionaires rather than actually sitting within their own interest,
Again, though, George, on that, how many years have the Daily Express been running that campaign, scrap the inheritance tax? I remember that 20 years ago. So this isn't like a new thing. This is 20 years in the making of I've seen car stickers and absolute madness. And you do think like, this is only going to worsen your life. Yeah, these papers owned by billionaires, push this narrative that only serves them and their sort of mates down in the city of London or Wall Street over in America. And it baffles me how people lap it up. I mean, I'd be struggling to work out who's buying the Daily Express still. Yeah.
You've muted yourself there, Renee.
You're muted there, Renee.
Am I muted? Sorry about that. I said, what's the answer, guys?
I think what we're doing here, Renee, I think that what me, yourself, Jay, and then George are doing, talking about different ideas and different ways of looking at the world and sort of a collective vision and sort of solidarity over greed and them sort of things. That's the answer. It has to be.
Yeah, and I suppose we should give a little shout out to James Martin, and one of the founders of What's Left, who was going to be a guest on with us today, but he's a bit under the weather, and so hopefully he'll hear us talking about him. But wish him well and speedy recovery.
Can I just say as well, before we crack on, if you do want to support the show and make sure we stay viable, our Patreon is up on the screen now. Go there, donate whatever you can afford, whether it's £1 or an hour's wage or whatever. That absolutely
Or $1.
Or $1. for our listeners, the other side of the pond, that would make a massive difference to us and make sure we can carry on doing what we're doing.
Yeah, or a euro, whatever you got. Dinars, we'll take anything. No,
Renee,
that would be a big help, because we do this all on our own, and we do it out of out of the passion and the love for what we believe in, but it does incur some costs. So we would very much appreciate any support you can give.
I just wanted to ask you, Renee, what are your thoughts? What difference has it made to you how you view Joe Biden standing on that picket line? Has it changed anything at all? Is it as sort of earth-shattering as everyone's making it out to be?
Well, I mean, to me, it was, a great moment. I thought it was symbolic largely, but that's fine. I mean, we need, good symbols. I don't know, what difference it really makes, except that, I think for the workers, I think if I had been a union member and the president came and stood with me and us on the picket line, I think it would have meant a lot. Now, how jaded some of the union members are against the left, I don't know. I don't see how they could be. But again, we've got a lot of people on the right, voting and acting against their own interests. So I'm sure that's the way that it is in the unions as well. Just like in the military. Oh,
yeah, I can't.
The latest that Donald Trump has called for retiring General Mark Milley to be executed.
I hadn't heard that now.
And so now, he just left office yesterday, General Milley, the head of Joint Chiefs of Staff. And so now he's had to hire, because he doesn't get Secret Service protection, he's had to hire all these private security people. And now, they were, one of the pundits on TV last night was saying, now just think about it. He's not going to be able to go to his own mailbox or go to go to Walmart, go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Because he's got crosshairs on his back.
What is he accusing him of? What is the proposed crime for the?
Just like every single person that Donald Trump appointed to his cabinet and said, I got all the best people. He turned on every single one of them, especially those who tried to rein him in. I'm so sorry about the dog yapping. It's really unprofessional. But anyway, it's a lot of things. And then Mark Milley was the one. I don't know if you remember the incident. It was in the Black Lives Matter protest in Washington, and Donald Trump walked out with military leaders and others, and they tear gassed the crowd, and then they walked to the church and where Donald Trump stood with the Bible upside down. And as soon as that happened, Mark Milley immediately issued a statement to all the troops that he should not have done that. He was very embarrassed about that, and that should never, never be done. And he was kind of duped. He didn't realize exactly what was going on. And that was the first thing, I think, that turned Donald Trump against him. But it's been things subsequently. They keep talking about how woke the military is now because they allow transgender people. And I don't know. He's just a decent person, and a competent leader. And that's what Donald Trump cannot abide. because he didn't fall into line. That's what it is.
I mean, if
So
nothing else,
he's, and Mark Milley wrote a book now that he's leaving and really dishing everything on Donald Trump.
I mean, if nothing else, at least Trump's moved on from calling for the execution of young innocent black men, like he was a few decades ago. So that's progress, I suppose. If
And
nothing
Part
else.
5, yep, absolutely. One of those boys back then, they were kids, who's of course now a man, been exonerated, is now a member of Congress. Or
Yeah.
I think that's so great. I mean,
Yeah, I saw an interview with all 5 of them, and that's so inspirational how they've turned that sort of extremely traumatic and heartbreaking story into positives in very different ways, all of them. And
I
yeah,
think I would be very bitter. It would be very difficult. And so I admire anyone that can go through that kind of adversity and come out and want to work on the positive side.
absolutely, absolutely. And what hope did you have when you had people like Trump calling for execution? They were never that amount of money sort of angled against you as a child. Some of them were 13, 14, weren't they? They were kids and sort of fighting. It's heartbreaking. I mean,
They were
yeah,
teenagers.
yeah.
Yeah. And Donald Trump, what business was it of his in the first place? Took out a full page ad in the New York Times calling for them to be executed. Just going on and on about it, and they were innocent.
It's
And do you think he would ever say, you know what, I got that wrong? You know, I'm really sorry about that now. That was a bad call on my part. He doesn't have the capacity or the strength of character to ever say anything. Never say I'm sorry.
Well,
He says
I
he
was
doesn't
just
even
I was
ask
just
God
trying
for forgiveness because he doesn't do anything wrong.
I was just trying to rack my brains, and I don't think I've ever seen anything of any kind of admission of wrongdoing or apology of anything from Donald Trump ever.
He's not capable. It's not in his DNA. It really isn't. That's the other thing why I don't understand that why people just cannot see right through him. He couldn't be more obvious at who he really is. And the fact that he's got the religious right, you know, literally worshiping him as the chosen one, it just blows my mind. Okay. I don't know what it's like in the UK in, those Protestant, or fundamentalist areas. But where I grew up in the Bible Belt in America, Oklahoma, which is solid red, of course, right now, grew up going to the Baptist Church, Southern Baptist Church, and we weren't supposed to dance. We couldn't dance, because it was too sexual. We obviously no gambling, but it was. I'm sorry, somebody keeps dinging me, and I thought I turned my sound off. We couldn't dance and couldn't gamble, and that went so far that we weren't even supposed to play any card games. And it was like a big deal. I don't know if they had this game in England, but there's a game called Old Maid. It was a card game, and it's for young children. And, if you get the Old Maid card, that you lose and you're going to be an old maid, who cares? I'll take the old maid anytime. But anyway, that was even kind of like risky because playing any kind of cards could lead to gambling. And then here you have this casino owner, porn star employer, and but it's all fine. Oh, that's just him. That's the way. When they would, ostracize anybody, anybody in their own community for wearing a skirt that was too high above their knee or whatever, or having braids or a tattoo. It makes no sense.
Do you
He's
think
like
there's misogyny
most
in that, Renee?
anti-Christian figure that you could think of.
Do you think there's a bit of misogyny in that rather than because he's a man, he's allowed to get away with it stuff?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Where do we
think
get started?
the big difference in this country is politics and religion aren't really intertwined as much as they are in America. In fact, I struggle to think of too many politicians I'd be able to tell you if they're religious or not. I mean,
Yeah.
I was brought up Irish Catholic, so I mean, obviously the Irish side of it meant we had to play cards as kids, so there was no getting away from card games as a child for me. But it was never ever the most important thing, and it was never something that sort of guided my moral compass, certainly. But certainly in politics, it's very rare. I mean, politicians who do talk about religion are the ones who stand out often. I don't know what your thoughts are, George.
I think the only one where I would think in ours sort of overtly religion comes into politics would be in the Northern Ireland scenario, but largely I think in UK politics, I think it's sort of a fringe thing to be affiliated to any religion in the politics. Obviously, the people will individually be religious, and that's their own business. But they're not using it as their campaign and their reason to vote for them.
I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong, Ronnie. I mean, I'm as come up before. I'm in local politics myself here, and we do get lobbied by religious groups, but I mean, it tends to be like anti-abortionist groups and stuff like that, but it's just battered off. And I'm never worried about any sort of repercussions for not doing something some fundamentalists want. I've never worried about there being consequences to me making my morals.
This is fairly new phenomenon here, because it's always supposedly been and was very carefully written into the foundation of the country that there was a distinct separation of church and state. And, anyone who's really studied the figures that founded the United States would know that by and large, they were not religious.
No.
And they wanted, and of course we were fleeing, we had fled, the church, and the monarchy when we came to the United States. So it was very much built in to the founding of the country that it, freedom of religion, freedom from religion, and freedom of religion to practice or not any faith that you like. But somehow over the years, and it's been a concerted effort among the religious right, the leaders of the religious right. This has been, they've been playing the long game. They played it with abortion rights, and it's all been very insidious. There's a movie that sort of outlines this, and I haven't seen the whole thing. I've got to watch it. I was urged to by a friend of mine. It called The Corporation, and it's about how the church or religious right planned and just basically took over the country. Yeah, I mean, they're actually saying out loud that this is a Christian nation, that we should have, that Christianity should be the official religion of the United States. Just like our founders intended. That's what they say. And it's like they couldn't be more wrong.
But just thinking about it there as well, Renee, the church in America seems to operate more like a sort of quasi-political corporate interest group rather than, because it couldn't be further away from the teachings of Christianity in how those sort of groups behave, like them big mega churches and calling for people to throw their money at us. If you want to be saved, send some money. I mean, the only time Jesus in the Bible showed me anger was at bankers flipping the tables over. I don't think he
well,
was.
of course, yeah, and they use that too as an anti-Jewish trope. You know, the money changers. Of course, they had to be Jewish. You know, and that's
Really forgetting that Jesus was Jewish as well, probably.
Well, I think so. I think so. But they use that as like, you know, the only time Jesus got angry was at the Jews, so it's okay for them to be anti-Semitic, I guess. Anyway, it's all about cruelty, hate, the other. Cruelty is the point. Cruelty is the point. Let's snatch food out of children's mouths, you know, poor children's mouths. A lot of kids, that's their food for the day, is what they get at school.
Well, never mind that it then exacerbates every problem that they face. You know, what does a hungry child do in class in school? Yeah. They sit there and think about how hungry they are rather than concentrating on
or they learning. Get into that fog, you know, their brains are, you know, not operating properly.
It's also the long-term problems like healthcare later on. You're going to have more health problems if you've not had proper nutrition as a child. That's costs us all more money in people having to pay for the healthcare then later on. People not being able to go to work and stuff because of health conditions when they're older. Well, we don't look after our kids, we are creating problems further down the line for all of society, and people don't look at it this way. It baffles me. And again, we spoke about it earlier before we started recording. There's absolutely no problem with corporate welfare. We can throw money at banks and bail out banks, but looking after humans, oh no, that's wrong. They've got to look after, they've got to stand on their own 2 feet. Well, where was JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs stand on their own 2 feet in 2008?
That's different.
I think we're about ready to wrap up, Renee. That's flown by. So, Renee, I'll let you run us out this week.
All right. So what's left? Oh my gosh, we're in a mess. But I think we just keep talking. I think we all keep working toward what's best for the majority of us, the people, and we just keep going. We cannot afford to stop. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.